You mamas that asked this must really be needing this. But I had two people ask me. One person said, if you had 24 hours to yourself, what would you do? And another person said, if you had a weekend to yourself, what would you do? You know, those are great questions because those things never happen. So a couple of weeks ago, I actually asked if you guys had any requests for videos or anything. And one of the things that was mentioned a couple of times was actually to do a more of like a Q&A, kind of get to know me kind of thing. And it made me really think and reflect and realize that it's about time for one of these, I guess, because just so you guys can get to know me a little better. So here goes. I have 3 pages of questions you guys asked. And so some of these I'm actually not going to address in the video today. Most of them I am, but some of them I'm not going to address because there's a couple of them I'm probably going to make a completely separate video on. I had several requests from people to share my testimony of faith, and so that will be a completely separate video. So I'm gonna get started with these questions, and there's no particular order, but I am gonna try to put them in some kind of cohesive order here, because some of them they're kind of like all over the place. The first one, let's start with this one, is how many siblings do I have? Okay, so I actually have 5 siblings. But my parents are like divorced and remarried, so some of them are half siblings. There are 6 of us total, so I have 2 sisters and 3 brothers. So yeah, so that's the siblings. The next one is, how did you know your husband was the one? Okay, so our story is kind of crazy. I don't know. So we actually have gone to school together since we were in elementary school. However, we never knew each other until it was his junior year and my sophomore year of high school when we actually met. Like, I saw him and I knew he existed, but we never had any classes together, and I don't know, we even shared like the same friends, but we just somehow, our paths never crossed. So anyway, long story short, we were in choir together, and so it was like this whole like little crush thing to start everything off, you know, all the silly crushes that you get. And yeah, okay, so long story short there, I guess you would say that we were kind of high school sweethearts, but in the midst of all that, we really were best friends, like completely best friends, and who just happened to have feelings for each other. We ended up he graduated before I did because he's a year older than me, and when he went to college, we still were best friends, and then when I went to college, we were at the same college together. And then we started dating, and it was just like that was, you know, it went from best friends to full on dating. Like, we loved each other, shared that with each other kind of thing. Anyway, so high school, best friends, sweethearts, and yeah, it's kind of a crazy story. There's more to it, but that's the short part of it. What made you start getting into growing gardens, or have you always done that? So, my grandparents had a very large farm that had been in our family since they've been in America. And so the bloodline runs deep with the farming. No, it's just something I've always just loved and has been ingrained in me since I was a child. The style of gardening I do, though, is not the style of gardening that my grandparents have ever done, to my knowledge. And so I actually do Back to Eden gardening. If you don't know what that is, I'll actually post a link to the video of the documentary down below, but it has been just the best method that I have ever done. But I love gardening and growing food. So that's the answer to that question. Okay, the next one, I am going to go ahead and answer this one because it's on the same page. Birth stories of the kids. So, okay, so I'm just going to do like this shortened version. So, because this could go really long, but, okay, so we have 6 kids. 5 of them are by birth. 1 is adopted. And most people actually don't know that. So yes, one of ours is adopted. We used to be foster parents, and I won't tell you which child it is, but one of our children is adopted through foster care, and the other 5 are through, and the other 5 are by birth. So the first was a botched induction. I became a statistic and ended up with an emergency C-section because I was on Pitocin, turned up full blast for like 19 hours. However, none of my other kids have been C-sections. They have all been VBACs, which is vaginal birth after cesarean, if you don't know what that means. I did have to be induced with 2 of them. One of them had to be induced because she had to be delivered at 39 weeks no matter what because of a birth defect. That is the short of the birth stories. But I will add this. So my second, because it was like really the first time that my body had ever like given birth. So I went into labor, and my labor was very long and very, very hard. Very hard. And my body just does not keep consistent contractions. And it was to the point where, like, honestly, my body was wearing out. Like, it was wearing out. And so they did have to give me just the tiniest bit of Pitocin just to get my contractions regular, because I just couldn't. I mean, you guys, it was 36 hours. 36 hours. So it was a little past 24 hours, and I was like, okay, give me an epidural at this point, because it was rough. It was really hard. It was really hard. So I am not one of those people that has easy birth. So, which leads me to the next question. Jerry Lynn asked me if I enjoyed being pregnant. Actually, yes, I have always enjoyed being pregnant for the most part. So I just do not enjoy the actual birth. Every single birth I've ever had has been traumatic. I have some heart issues, and so my blood pressure drops really bad, and I end up on oxygen, and all of my babies are big and have had cords wrapped around their necks and all that kind of stuff, like just very, like they've always been like traumatic. With one of my daughters was born at 41 weeks, 5 days. And and that was one of the ones that had to be induced, but they only induced to get my labor started and then let my body do the rest, because my OB is amazing. And then my water broke, and when my water broke, she was so big, and I think just the way that my body is built, because I have a very short torso, the way my body was built, like she immediately started having D-cells when my water broke. And so I think it's just that, so what was happening was the cord was wrapped around her neck, and it was like clamping every time I would contract, and it was pushing on, and my OB is very conservative with how he treats, and he's very like pro mama, pro VBAC, pro natural birth, like all the things. And so he stood in my room and watched the monitors before he was like, okay, so we're going to try this. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, like he's just so calm and collected. He didn't rush in and didn't say, hurry, let's get her in for a C-section stat, like I know so many other people would. But he stood there and he watched, and he was very patient with everything. And he said, okay, so this is what we're going to do. And with Sophia, I actually had to have something called an amnio infusion, which is basically where it's like this infusion that they do, kind of like a catheter into your uterus, I guess, and it pushes like water in as you contract. So it kept the pressure off of the cord around her neck, and so she quit decelling because it was constantly pushing water in. past that part, like the actual like her being born part, was an amazing experience. And one of my favorite things is, like, I always joke and say my OB is the closest OB you could have to having a midwife, and I'm serious about that. Like, he's amazing. And so every baby, except for my first, because that was a different OB. Anyway, every baby, when they are coming out, he's like, okay, reach down and grab your baby. And so every time I get to grab my own baby and pull them up on my chest, and that's like his thing. And he prayed over us through every pregnancy and birth, and So, but being pregnant, yes, I have always loved. The births have always been somewhat traumatic in a sense. And so, yeah. Okay, so some other questions, kind of more like personal, about personal preferences and things like that are, okay, so I already answered that one. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? I'm actually an introvert. In large groups, I don't like that, and I don't feel like I can open up and just talk to people and things. I tend to kind of retreat inwardly a little bit, but when it's a group of friends together, like if I'm with a group of ladies, like for a mom's night, I am in my element. I love it. Love it. I'm a very relational person. I did a personality test. I'm an INFJ. That's what I am. And I read the definition of that, and it's pretty to a T about me. So I don't do Enneagram, and I really don't stake a lot in the INFJ thing, but it is me to a T, and it is interesting. But yeah, so I'm a friendly person. I'm an introvert, and I love people. I love friends, and yeah, I thrive on it. So with that being said, I got the question, you mamas that ask this must really be needing this. But I had 2 people ask me. One person said, if you had 24 hours to yourself, what would you do? And another person said, if you had a weekend to yourself, what would you do? You know, those are great questions, because those things never happen. But I think if they did, you know, I have said before, I would just love to just have a weekend where I could just pull everything out of my house, clean it top to bottom with nothing in it, and then put everything, not everything, only the things that I really, really want back in. Any other mamas feel that way? Am I alone? That is my dream. So if I had a weekend to myself, that's what I would do. But I would have to have somebody help me take the things out. I would take everything out of the house, put it outside, clean my house top to bottom. I'm talking scrub the walls, the baseboards, the floors, the everything, the carpets. I would scrub it like crazy, and then I would put only the things that I really, really want back in my house. Oh, I would also repaint, because kid hands. How does that even happen? Anyway, you guys. Okay, so I answered, do I have siblings? What I would do on a weekend? Have I ever considered public school? Not really. I have, one of our sons actually did go to pre-K in public school. All right, so what are your hobbies? My hobbies, okay. So I love hiking. Love hiking the mountains. That's something else I would love to do for 24 hours, would be just to go, but I wouldn't want to be alone. To go camping, maybe without my kids. It's been a really long time since I've been camping without kids. I feel bad when I say that, though. I love to be with my kids. And when I say things like that, I don't mean that in a way like, oh, I just need a break from my kids. But I think sometimes it is really good for us to have a moment to recharge. And I don't mean that selfishly. I mean that more because I just think it's healthy to have time with our husbands, because I wouldn't want to be alone. I would want to go with my husband camping. So But yeah, so and the recharge, I mean, is just getting able to reconnect with my spouse without my children around, because ultimately, and I'm going off on a tangent here, but ultimately, you and your spouse come before your children, because in the sense that when your children leave home someday, you and your spouse are still going to be there, and it's just so important to maintain that healthy marriage relationship and healthy relationship with each other, because when your kids are gone, that's tough if your relationship is gone as well. But anyway, that was kind of a tangent. We're actually doing marriage counseling for a couple right now, so that's what we were talking about the other night. But so that's kind of been on my brain. So if I could live anywhere, okay, so one question was, have I always lived in Tennessee? Yes, I have always lived in Tennessee, born and raised in East Tennessee. The next question was, if you could live anywhere else, where would it be? Okay, so there's two answers to this, because one question said, if I could live anywhere in the world, where would it be? So two answers to this question. One, if it had to be in the U.S., it would probably be in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. I love it there. It's beautiful. I fell in love with that area growing up. And we used to vacation there sometimes on spring break, and it was just gorgeous. It was respite for my soul, even at a very young age. It's beautiful. So that would be the one place. The other would be Nicaragua. So my in-laws actually were missionaries in Nicaragua for many years, and I had the privilege of going down there as well. And John and I actually, when my in-laws came home from their ministry, we actually discussed, just kind of in a roundabout kind of way, about we actually discussed moving down there and taking over their ministry. However, there were things in our life that ended up happening that prevented that, and so it was just not God's timing. But I have such a passion and heart for the people of Nicaragua, and so if I could move anywhere in the world, I guess it would be there. And I love them very much. So okay, so do I read fiction? So okay, so mainly the fiction that I read is children's novels, young adult novels to my kids. I actually really love history, and so normally what I read are adult, like nonfiction books, like about the George Washington Secret Six, about the spy ring during the Revolution, and I do like Wendell Berry, and I do, and mostly what I read, for the most part, is for myself, is like Sally Clarkson books, and Jen Wilkin, and Lydia Brownback. Her book on Proverbs is excellent. So yeah, so as far as reading for myself, that's mainly the kind of stuff that I read. I actually have a video of some of our favorite read alouds that I will link down below, because that was some questions too. And that can get kind of long because I'm passionate about reading. And that is a list that is constantly changing. Okay, so another question was, what would be a perfect date night for me? So I don't like to watch movies, number one. So, so as far as going on a date, a movie will not be involved. We really like to do home dates, because we're in a season of life where it's not always easy to have someone watch our kids. And so one of us, after the kids go to bed, one of us will run out and get our favorite meal to go from a restaurant, bring it home, and we will eat and play board games, or sometimes we do watch like a TV show or something like that. But yeah, so that's what we do a lot of times. But I actually prefer date days rather than date nights. So my perfect date day would be to go on a hike or to the mountains together, because that's my jam. Okay, so hobbies. So someone asked hobbies. So I love to go to the mountains. I love to go camping. I love to garden. I love to cook. those are all, I guess, my favorite hobbies. So our coffee, drinking coffee, is that a hobby? Because I feel like that's one of mine now. Drinking a hot cup of coffee, which doesn't always happen. I usually have to heat it up a few times. Okay, so another question, did I always want a large family, or did my husband? Actually, it's funny because God really led and changed our hearts on that, or we allowed God to lead and change our hearts on that, is that we always said 2 or 3 kids, I think. And actually we had my 2 older boys, and it was just kind of okay. So that was that, and that would be our kids. I mean, we didn't do anything to cut off the ability to have children at that point. However, it just wasn't on our radar to have another kid, or if we did, it would be way down the road. And then that's when our hearts were led to being foster parents, and then within all that, we were having babies and all that kind of stuff. So long story short, we just God really softened our hearts to be open to his calling and his leading on our children. Okay, so another question is, what was my favorite subject in school? And this happens to be my favorite subject even now, and that is history. I love history. I also really, really love science, specifically biology, zoology, that kind of stuff. However, I do not like the chemistry and physics side of science. That is just not my thing. I like more the life science side. One of the questions is, do I long for time alone? And if so, how do I do that with having so many little ones? So having so many little ones, my oldest is only 10, and there are 6 of them. At one point I did have, I think I had 4, ages 4 and under at one point. And that does get really hard. It really does. Honestly, it gets hard. And even now, because my older kids are boys, and so my boys are great, and they can be super handy and helpful, and they really, really, truly are. But ultimately, there's something innately in girls that where they can help kind of be little mommies really early, earlier on than boys. That maternal instinct is kind of already there and kicks in naturally. And so I've never really had that. So there has been times where it really has been difficult for me to there are days where, I have wanted to, quote, breathe my own air. Where you get to the end of the day and it literally feels like you've had people breathing in your face right here all day. And I think that that's really a natural thing, but ultimately, really and truly, the only way that I get through those days where I feel super overwhelmed like that is just by leaning into the Lord. And honestly, there have been many a days where I'm like, God, you need to redeem this day because I'm totally screwing it up. And so really clinging to the Lord in those times. And I am so, so grateful for my husband. So grateful for my husband. He is so complimentary to me, and God has just softened his heart to be able to kind of tell when I've had those days, and when those, be intuitive to those moments with me. How do you get your kids to get along? That's a really hard one. I think just constantly just reminding them and trying to reach their hearts, speaking truth and grace and the gospel into them constantly. It's really, really hard because there's days where I get really frustrated with the constant bickering. But I think it's really important for you to just voice that, to just have them sit down with you and say, hey, listen, especially if they're it's nice, because the main ones that are bickering in my house right now are my 2 older boys. And so it's nice because I can just call them to come and sit down with me, and we just kind of have a heart to heart. And I'm like, hey, listen, here's the deal. You guys, this is not okay. It's not okay to treat anyone this way. This is your brother. Regardless of what happens, they are always your brother, and you need to treat them the same way that you would treat a friend. And because they ultimately treat each other differently than they treat their friends a lot of times. And I think that that comes with the territory of just being so close and comfortable with somebody that you let your hair down, and that's not always a bad, and sometimes that's a bad thing. You let the people you're closest to see the worst part of you. And so I think that it's really important just to kind of call them out on that and draw them back in. Pull them by their heartstrings back in and just remind them, that they have been given grace by the Lord, and that it's their job to show that same grace to their sibling, even when they're frustrated or tired or annoyed. And that, just that constant reiteration. My hope and prayer is that someday that it just clicks with them and that they will be the best of friends when they're adults or teenagers. And sometimes they are, like, they will go from being best friends to just at each other's throats. So I would just encourage you in that, just pull the Lord into it, because ultimately Jesus is the one who changes their hearts, and those kind of attitudes and actions are totally and completely a heart issue. And so as parents, our job is to disciple them, and that means reaching their hearts just like the Lord has reached ours. And so using scripture and praying and just kind of calling them out in their sin, because that's what it is. It's sin when they are acting that way. And so yeah, that's what I would say. Do we have any pets? We actually used to have 2 golden retrievers, Mindy and Izzy, my first babies. They are no longer with us, and we currently have 2 hermit crabs. We did have 4. 2 of them died. So, sad times. Okay, so the next question is, what do you think you'll do when you're done homeschooling? So, I have thought about this, but honestly, I think probably what will end up happening is my oldest and my youngest are 9 years apart from each other. And so I am assuming, it may not be so, but I am assuming that by that point I may possibly have grandchildren. My heart and my desire is to help disciple and mentor unwed mothers, young mothers specifically. I would love to be in that position. I know that it would be incredibly difficult at times, just because, especially with some women who don't have a family to help them through that. But having been a foster parent has led my heart in that direction of wanting to help be a support to mothers who don't have anyone to help equip them in motherhood and don't have a spouse to help them through motherhood. And so I would really love to do that. And so when I think about the future as far as, well, what will I do when my kids are no longer at home, I feel like that would be an amazing experience and opportunity for me to be a part of. So that is something that is in my heart that I desire to do, and I may even be able to start doing that as my kids get a little older and more independent with school and stuff like that, even before they're all out of the house. So that is something I would love to do. So thanks for asking that question. That's something that I've thought about a lot, but I don't really voice. And so, I don't know, sometimes it's nice to talk about things. Okay, so the next question, these 2 questions come from Colleen. Colleen asks, what is my favorite movie? I really do love 50 First Dates. I just think it's hilarious. And I do love Fried Green Tomatoes. Yeah, so I guess those would be my favorite movies, but I don't really watch movies. I'm more of a TV show person if I watch anything. And I do really love documentaries because I'm a nerd like that. So anything Ken Burns documentaries. Yeah, there you go. And then her next question, Colleen says, when can you come visit me in Hilton Head? Well, Colleen, when this video goes up, I'm on my way down there. I'm just kidding. I wish I was. Hey, you know what? Anytime that you want me down there, girl, I will find somebody to watch my kids. Let me know and I will be there for real. All right, so that was a little long-winded, but I think that is everything. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. It was fun answering some of these questions that you guys sent me. If you have any other questions, put them down in the comments below. Make sure you push that subscribe button and that notification bell, and you'll know anytime videos are coming out. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, for supporting my channel, and I hope that you guys have a blessed day. Thanks so much, guys. See you later.